The history of love is often written in blood and tears, but few stories are as tragic or as terrifying as the legend that haunts the Phra Khanong Canal in Thailand. It is a story not of hatred, but of a love so powerful, so obsessive, that it refused to bow to the laws of nature. It refused to accept death. Decades ago, before the concrete jungle of modern Bangkok swallowed the countryside, Phra Khanong was a quiet place. It was a land of waterways, thick groves of banana trees, and wooden houses standing on stilts above the muddy banks. Here lived a young couple, Mak and Nak. Their love was the envy of the village. They were inseparable, their bond forging a promise that they would be together forever, in this life and the next. But war does not care for promises. Mak was conscripted into the army to fight in a distant conflict. He was forced to leave his pregnant wife behind. As he boarded the boat that would take him away, he looked back to see Nak standing on the pier, tears streaming from her face, her hand resting on her swollen belly. She waved until she was nothing but a speck in the distance. Mak vowed he would return. He had to return. Months turned into a year. The war was brutal. Mak survived in the trenches, surrounded by disease and death. He suffered a severe chest wound that nearly killed him. For weeks he lay in a fever dream, hovering between life and death. The only thing that tethered his soul to his body was the image of Nak's face. He whispered her name in his sleep. He fought the Reaper not for his own sake, but for hers. Meanwhile, back in the village, a different kind of tragedy was unfolding. The time for Nak to give birth had arrived, but there were no doctors, only an old midwife. The labor was difficult. The pain was excruciating. Screams echoed from the wooden house, piercing the silence of the night. And then silence. The villagers knew what had happened. It was a death considered the most violent and spiritually powerful in Thai belief. Death during childbirth. Both mother and child had perished. According to tradition, they were buried quickly, with rituals performed to suppress their spirits. The house was abandoned. The village mourned. But then the war ended. Mak, against all odds, recovered. He began the long journey home, his heart pounding with anticipation. He did not know the truth. He did not know that he was returning to a home that no longer existed, to a wife who was no longer breathing. He was rowing his boat to a nightmare. When Mak's boat finally drifted into the Phra Khanong Canal, the sun was setting. The water turned a deep blood-red hue. The air was heavy and still. As he approached his house, he expected to see weeds and decay after his long absence. Instead, he saw a lantern glowing warmly on the porch. And there she was, Nak. She stood by the water's edge, holding a bundle in her arms. She looked beautiful, perhaps even more beautiful than the day he left. Her skin was pale, glowing like porcelain in the twilight. Mak rushed to her, ignoring his fatigue. He embraced her, burying his face in her hair. She felt cold against his skin, a chill that seeped into his bones, but he dismissed it as the cool evening air. He looked at the baby in her arms, his son. The family was whole again. Days turned into weeks. Mock lived in a bubble of happiness. He spent every moment with his wife and child. But to the outside world, the reality was horrifyingly different. The villagers were terrified. They saw Mock sitting on his porch alone, talking to the air. They saw him cradling a pillow as if it were a baby. But they dared not approach him. Those who tried to warn him were met with strange accidents, a sudden gust of wind, a terrifying shriek in the night, or a spectral figure standing in their path with eyes burning like coals. The ghost of Nak was protective, jealous, and dangerous. She wanted her husband to herself. She wanted to maintain the illusion of their perfect life, and she would kill anyone who threatened to shatter it. Inside the house, subtle signs began to emerge. Mock noticed that the house was always dark. Nak refused to go out during the day. She moved with a strange gliding grace, her feet barely making a sound on the floorboards. The house had a peculiar smell, a mix of sweet flowers and something underlying it, something musky, like wet earth and rotting wood. One evening, Mock's friends from the war came to visit. They had heard the rumors and wanted to save their comrade. They stood at the bottom of the stairs, calling out to him. Mock invited them up, eager to introduce his wife and son. But when the friends looked at Nak, they did not see the beautiful woman Mock saw. They saw a gaunt, pale figure with hollow eyes. They felt an overwhelming aura of malice. They refused the food and drink she offered, their hands trembling. They tried to tell Mock the truth, whispering that Nak was dead, that she was buried in the cemetery behind the temple. Mock was furious. He chased them away, accusing them of being jealous of his happiness. He returned to Nak, who was weeping silently in the corner. He comforted her, promising that he would never believe them. He promised he would never leave her. The ghost smiled, a cold, satisfied smile. She had won, for now. The illusion held strong, powered by Mock's love and Nak's spiritual energy. But the laws of the dead cannot be bent forever. The veil began to thin. It happened on a quiet afternoon. Mock was resting on the floor, half asleep. Nak was in the kitchen area, preparing a meal. She was making nam prik, a traditional chili paste. Mock listened to the rhythmic sound of the pestle hitting the mortar. Thud, thud, thud. It was a comforting, domestic sound. But then the rhythm stopped. Mock opened his eyes lazily. Through the doorway he saw Nak holding a lime. Her grip slipped and the lime rolled across the uneven floorboards. It fell through a wide gap in the wood, dropping down to the muddy ground beneath the raised house. In a normal world, a person would walk down the stairs to retrieve it. But Mock watched as Nak did something impossible. She did not stand up. She remained seated. She simply extended her arm toward the hole in the floor. Mock blinked, thinking his eyes were playing tricks on him, but the horror was real. Nak's arm began to stretch, the skin elongated, the joints cracked and popped, extending unnaturally like melted wax. The arm grew longer and longer, slithering down through the floorboards like a pale serpent. It reached all the way to the ground, picked up the lime, and then snapped back to its normal length in the blink of an eye. Mock lay frozen, His blood turned to ice. His heart hammered against his ribs so hard he thought it would burst. He closed his eyes tight, praying to the Buddha that it was a hallucination. But deep down, the soldier knew. He had seen death in war. He knew what human bodies could and could not do. The doubt had taken root. That night, Mak could not sleep. He lay beside the woman he loved, but now every touch felt wrong. Her skin felt too cold. Her breathing was too shallow. He remembered the warnings of his friends. He remembered the strange smell. He recalled an ancient superstition told by the elders. To see a spirit in its true form, one must look at it upside down, peering back between one's own legs. It was a dangerous ritual, a way to peer into the spirit world. Waiting until he was sure Nak was asleep, Mak slowly got out of bed. He crept to the end of the room. His hands were shaking violently. He took a deep breath, bent over at the waist, and looked back between his legs at the bed. The scream died in his throat. The beautiful wife was gone. Lying on the bed was a rotting, desiccated corpse. Patches of skin peeled away to reveal yellowed bone. Her eyes with empty sockets, staring blindly at the ceiling. In her skeletal arms she clutched the tiny, dry remains of a fetus. The room was not the clean, warm home he thought he lived in. It was a ruin, covered in dust, cobwebs, and dead leaves. The delicious food on the table was nothing but worms and insects. Mak stood up, gasping for air. The illusion had shattered completely. He was living in a grave. Mak knew he had to escape, but he also knew that if Nak realized he knew the truth, her love would turn into a terrifying rage. He needed a plan. The next evening, Mak told Nak he needed to go down to the canal to urinate. To keep her from becoming suspicious, he punched a small hole in the bottom of a water jar and filled it with water. The sound of the trickling water mimicked the sound of him relieving himself. As the water trickled, Mak ran. He ran as he had never run in the war. He sprinted through the darkness, the tall grass slashing at his legs, heading toward the local temple, Wat Mahabut. The temple ground was sacred. Spirits could not enter the holy sanctuary. Back at the house, the water jar finally dried out. The silence stretched on. Nak called out to her husband. No answer. She called again. Her voice grew shrill. She floated down to the pier and saw the empty space where Mak should have been. She saw the footprints leading away. Her scream tore the night sky apart. It was a sound of pure anguish and fury. Her form twisted, transforming from the beautiful wife into the terrifying spirit Mak had seen. She flew through the air, her hair whipping like black flames, hunting for the man who had abandoned her. Mak reached the temple just as a shadow fell over him. He scrambled over the holy wall, collapsing onto the sacred ground. Nak stopped at the barrier, unable to cross. She raged at the gates, extending her supernatural arms, trying to grab him. She screamed that she loved him, that they belonged together, that death was not a reason to part. The villagers cowered in their homes as the ghost unleashed her wrath. The entire village was under siege. Nak threatened to flood the village, to kill everyone if her husband was not returned to her. Monks tried to chant incantations, but her power was too great. She was fueled by the strongest emotion of all, heartbroken love. Finally, a legendary monk, Somdet To, arrived from a distant temple. He was a figure of immense spiritual power.
He confronted the raging spirit. He did not fight her with violence, but with Dhamma. He told her of the cycle of life and death, of the suffering caused by attachment. He told her that her husband could not live in the world of the dead, and she could not live in the world of the living. He promised her that if she let go, she would be reunited with him in the next life, a life where they could truly be together. Weeping, the spirit of Nak finally relented. Her terrifying form softened. She looked at Mak one last time, her eyes filled with eternal sorrow. The monk trapped her spirit in the bone of her forehead, the center of her spiritual power, and bound it with a sacred cloth. The terror of Phra Khanong ended that night. The bone form was kept by the royal family for generations, ensuring the spirit would never return. But the story did not die. Today, if you visit the Wat Mahabut temple in Bangkok, you will find a shrine dedicated to her. It is filled with toys for her child and dresses for her. People come not to exorcise her, but to pray to her. They pray for love. They pray to avoid military conscription. Because even though she was a monster to some, to others she is the ultimate symbol of devotion. She is the woman who defied death for love. And they say, on quiet nights by the canal, if you listen closely to the wind, you can still hear a mother singing a lullaby, waiting for her husband to come home.